So one of the common issues I hear from my patients as well as people online is that they don't really believe in cognitive behavioral therapy for insomnia anymore, or they don't think it will really work for them. And one of the specific strategies that they really get sort of frustrated about is this idea of sleep restriction therapy, where they feel like they've tried sleep restriction therapy and it didn't work and it was a horrible experience, and they're rightfully in a lot of ways a non-believer. So in this video, I'm going to talk about some of the common pitfalls that I see when it comes to people engaging in sleep restriction therapy and a few musings about how we can sort of navigate these issues. If you're new here, my name is Dr. Parky. I'm a clinical psychologist and behavioral sleep medicine specialist. I provide evidence-based non-pharmacological treatments for sleep problems like chronic insomnia, and I'm also the author of this book, The Insomnia Paradox, which talks about self-help strategies where you can apply CBT-I strategies to your own unique sleep problem. So the first common pitfall I see is that patients don't engage in sleep restriction therapy long enough. So they tried for a day or two, saw that they only got a few hours worth of sleep, and they were like, screw this. This doesn't work for me. This is a horrible experience. I'm never going to do it again. And the tricky part of not engaging in sleep restriction therapy for long enough is that it doesn't give our body's sleep regulation systems long enough to re-regulate over time. And it's kind of like I did all the great work the first night, and because I had a poor first night, I'm giving up after the second night, where they could have kind of reaped the rewards if they really stuck with it for at least, let's say, a week. So if you are engaging in sleep restriction therapy, I would try to give yourself at least a week or two to be able to really see and reap the benefits of the work that you're doing. And how you might engage in sleep restriction therapy might be to say, okay, if I'm sleeping about 6 hours, then I'm just going to add 30 minutes to that, and that's my time in bed window. If you're sleeping much less than 6 hours, and you can make 6 hours kind of your cutoff, because we don't want you to be spending like 2 or 3 hours in bed. That would be total torture. So that can be one way to make sure that you're engaging in sleep restriction properly and getting to reap the benefits of all the hard work that you're doing. So not doing sleep restriction therapy for long enough is one common pitfall, but I think one of the most important pitfalls that I typically see with sleep restriction is that the clinician wasn't good at helping that person reduce their anxiety about the sleep restriction in the first place. And this is particularly important because the goal of sleep restriction therapy, as you might imagine, is to build up our appetite for sleep. So we're saying, no matter what, I'm only spending 7 hours in bed, and then the rest of the time I'm going to be awake and active and building up my appetite for sleep. So our sleep pressure should, in theory, go up. But the problem is that there's a commensurate increase in anxiety, and anxiety is the arch enemy of sleep and sleep pressure. So in this context, a person might be doing the great work of doing sleep restriction, but they're so dang anxious. They're like, holy crap, I only have 7 hours left to sleep. I only have 6 hours left to sleep. I only have 5 hours left to sleep. And this commensurate increase in anxiety washes over the great work that they're doing with sleep restriction, which kind of keeps them in this really painful loop where they're doing the great work, but their anxiety won't let them sleep. So one of the things that will be really helpful is to help the patient manage their anxiety. And one thing that can be quite helpful, number one, is to be able to say that the point of sleep restriction or time in bed restriction isn't necessarily to reduce how much sleep you're getting. In fact, it's really meant to just increase the quality of sleep. And that's what the research suggests as well, where people, when they engage in sleep restriction therapy, they don't necessarily reduce how much sleep they're actually getting. If anything, there might be a slight reduction over the first week, but after that, they're really just getting the same amount of sleep, if not more, but just more consolidated with higher quality and with deeper sleep. And a second thing that can be helpful is to be able to say, hey, like, despite the fact that you've been struggling with insomnia for so long, you're a really resilient person. And in this case, what we're doing is sacrificing a few chess pieces to win the game. We're sacrificing a couple nights. Maybe for the first few nights, sleep is a little bit harder to come by. But then over time, with the increase in sleep pressure, and assuming your anxiety is well managed, and you're able to remind yourself, well, yeah, like I've had times where I've slept like 2 hours, 3 hours, and it sucked, but I could kind of do it. Like that sort of pulling for inner resilience, that pulling for success, in spite of sleep problems, can be a great way to sort of manage your anxiety prior to engaging in sleep restriction therapy, so you actually get the benefits of higher sleep pressure, a stronger circadian rhythm, while your anxiety remains, relatively low, or at least not like skyrocketed. And then pitfall number three is that you're engaging in behaviors like compensatory behaviors that actually sabotage the great work that you're doing. So let's say your time in bed window is 12 to 7, you're engaging in sleep restriction therapy, but then every other night you're like, ooh, that was a hard night. Maybe I'll just sleep until 8 or 9, maybe that's not a big deal. Or maybe I'll just take a bit of a nap in the afternoon because it was such a hard night. But all those things actually, again, sabotage the good work that you're doing to build up that extra pressure for sleep that's coming from the sleep restriction, where in some ways you're losing some of the great work that you're doing by sleeping in or going to bed too early or taking a nap in the middle of the day. So if you do need to rest, of course, a little bit of rest is totally okay. If you need to lie down, or if you need to, take a bit of a nap because you're engaging in something dangerous like driving a car or using heavy machinery, totally fine. But for the most part, to do your best to stay within that sort of time in bed window. And a final pitfall that I can think about is that for some people, when we think about this from a more principled perspective rather than just a cookie cutter protocol, is that maybe for some people, sleep restriction therapy is not the answer. Like for some people, they might actually just be spending 7 hours time in bed, and any additional restriction isn't particularly helpful, where it's important to pull from other strategies. Like maybe for this person, it's not about the spending less time in bed, it's about targeting the anxious thoughts that maintain sleep problems, or maybe breaking the conditioned arousal and restoring the association between bed and sleep rather than sort of having this association between bed and wake. Maybe it's about dealing with worries. That's kind of why it's important to be able to have a more nuanced way of understanding CBTI. So we're not just throwing the same stuff at every single person, because telling somebody to engage in sleep restriction is really, really hard. It's painful. So we need to make sure that if a person's going to do it, that they're actually going to get something out of it. So hopefully this video was helpful to learn a little bit more about why sleep restriction therapy is sometimes seen in such a negative light, especially when it's applied in a way that doesn't feel right for the patients. Otherwise, I hope you enjoyed this video, and I'll see you in the next one.